Utenos lager beer.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. Another one from the supermarket around the corner, and this is the Utenos Sviesusis Alus lager beer. It's from Lithuania, in case you're wondering, and it's one of the beers that was in the freezer, not in the freezer, the fucking freezer, twat. It was in the fridge in the shop round the corner. I had absolutely no idea what it was, where it came from, but I thought I'm going to try it anyway, and I picked them up over a course of a couple of days. I'm going to be reviewing them. So far, they've not been great, it has to be said. A lot of them come from the Carlsberg conglomerate of breweries, and they're from countries like Latvia and Lithuania. I've not seen them advertised or reviewed anywhere in the UK, so I thought, well, someone's got to do it, and I'll do it. And as I say, I'm not really impressed, to be honest. There was one that I tried yesterday from Latvia. It was an unfiltered lager. That wasn't bad, to be fair. It was a bit like a Keller beer. Not a fantastic Keller beer, but it was okay. It was drinkable, and for the price, it wasn't bad at all. And I've decided to try and get hold of all of the stuff they've got in there just to review it. If it's shit, it's shit. At least you're going to know about it, and you may not make the same mistake as I do. So it might save you a couple of quid. But this is the Utenos, I think that's how it's pronounced. It's from Lithuania, and it's their flagship beer. It is a lager beer. Now, I did some research on it, as I always do with the beers that I review, just so I can give you some knowledge, save you looking it up, give you a bit of background to the beer. And to be honest, it's not very interesting history. The brewery's only been going since 1977, and it's based in Lithuania. They make a big thing about it being very eco-friendly and modern. They use well water, which they bored down themselves. I wouldn't say it's an artesian well, but they've got it, and it's fresh water that goes into this, so that can't be bad. I'm sure the water must get treated. In fact, I'm almost certain that the water, they make a big thing about these wells that they bore and everything. I'm sure they must treat the water somehow. If nothing else, it's filtered. But there you go. So you don't think you're drinking fresh from the mountain stream. It ain't like that at all. Anyway, what did intrigue me about this though, there's no brew sheet on there as well, so I'm not going to give you any ingredients, details, or nothing like that. But what they did make a point of saying, and it was really interesting because it spurred me on to do a little bit more research. It is the fact that they use light, stable hops. Now, if you've ever watched any of my videos, you'll see me having a rant and a rave about beer that's in green bottles or clear bottles, especially lagers, how they go light struck and how they smell. They go skunky and whatnot. And basically there's a chemical reaction, and when you open the bottle, you know about it. It just smells like rotting vegetables, burnt leaves. It's a real horrible, sorry, not burnt leaves, stewed leaves. It's a real horrible smell. I really don't like it, but it affects the flavour of the beer as well. And I think some companies do it on purpose. Heineken, I'm almost certain, do it because their beer is so bland. The skunkiness that goes in there, it gives it a bit of flavour, and some people have gotten used to it. But for me, it just puts me right off. And I don't care who you are. It's not a nice flavour. I don't think so anyway. It's certainly not a nice smell. But they've used what's called as light stable hops. Now, I've heard rumour about them before, and I should have researched it a little bit more, but I decided to do a little bit more research today. And it's quite interesting what you can come up with. They've come up with something now called tetra or hexa hops, which have basically gone through a chemical reaction. They induce a chemical reaction which minimises the formation of MBT. Now, MBT is basically what gives you your skunk smell and flavour. And the chemical compound MBT is also what's present in skunk spray, as in the animal skunk spray. The two are similar, obviously not as intense as a skunk spray, but the chemical compound is there. And the fact that that fucking dog, he's been barking all day and nothing. And yeah, thank you. The missus has just told him to shut up. I don't like telling him to shut up because he's my little mate, but sometimes, really, especially when he's on the sofa and he barks in your ear hole, it's fucking deafening. Anyway, light struck hops, as I was getting back to, the chemical compound in light struck hops is also present in a skunk spray. Obviously not as intense, but the flavour and the aroma is there, but not as much as in abundance as it is on a skunk spray. That's the point I'm trying to make. But they've used that in here. Now, obviously in a can, it's not going to make much difference, but in a bottle, that is going to make a lot of difference, because if you put it in a green bottle or a clear bottle, then there is going to be less chance of a reaction. Not 100%, they haven't quite got it out there yet. And in their research for trying to get this chemical reaction induced, they also found there were 2 other sources of the skunky flavour, and it wasn't from the hops. And that's quite interesting. And up to this point, they still haven't worked out what that is. So there's obviously some sort of chemical reaction going on, that, as well as the hops. And it would explain why sometimes I've got a bit of a skunky smell and taste that's come out of a beer bottle that's brown, or sometimes even a can. Now, in a lot of beers, especially canned beers, you get sulphur. If it's a lager, you'll get sulphur build-up. That's absolutely normal. I have no problem with that whatsoever, because it just disperses in the air. It doesn't affect the flavour. But in some of the cheaper lagers, I have got a very, very slight skunky sort of smell. And I haven't actually said it on the video, because in my head I thought, well, it can't be skunks because it's in a can. But apparently there is another 2 sources of skunky aromas and flavours, and it isn't from the hops, which is really interesting. So yeah, watch this space. I'm going to do a little bit more research on that, but it's something that fascinates me. Boring for most people, I know, but I'm a sad fucker. I'm full of useless information that will get me absolutely nowhere in life whatsoever. Anyway, let's investigate this beer. Right, it is a pint, as it says there, 1 pinter. Now, if this is crap, at least they put 568 ml into a can, which I really like, because you don't get pints in cans anymore for some reason. You look at all the brewers now, the big brewers, they're putting 440 ml and they're reducing the ABV. And I think that's a bit of a con, to be honest, but with this lot, you're getting the full whack, you're getting 5%. Well, I say that, you're getting the full whack. I don't know what the beer is going to taste like. I'm going to guess that it's not that great, because I think this lot are part of the Carlsberg Brewery conglomerate, and they brew a hell of a lot of beer. They do Baltic Porter as well, which is unusual, and they also do a cider, they do Radlers, they do spring water. So it's not just beer, and that's not too unusual, because a lot of German brewers do that as well, certainly Radlers and spring water. But the cider is a new one. They've called it Summersby, which is, an English name. But that's where we are with Utenos, or Utenos, I think that's how it's pronounced. And they've got that word Sviesusis, or whatever. Alus in Lithuanian means beer. So with that in mind, let's get it open. Right, I really haven't got high hopes for this. So if it's in any way decent, it will be a bonus. And as I say, so far, all these foreign beers, I was hoping they were going to be Czech beers, but they weren't. They're either Latvian, Lithuanian. I've picked up a Romanian beer as well. Now I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's probably the best-selling beer of all them countries. And if it's the best-selling beer, that doesn't mean it's necessarily good. But there you go. Right, here's a beer in a glass. Clear, looks like a lager. Lots of carbonation. Aroma. Grainy and slightly cheap smelling. There's a little bit of sulphur in there, and the sulphur is the sort of sulphur smell that I've associated with certain Bavarian brewers, Tuka mainly, and it ain't a good smell or flavour. Oh, fucking hell. Try not to get the head on your nose. It's quite sweet and grainy. There's some honey sweetness in there, and there's a bit of grain sort of smell in there, but the aromas ain't big. It looks reasonably decent. Head is dissipating quite quickly. Lots of carbonation in that. Let's get it down ye olde hatch. Bottoms up. And you know what? That ain't bad. That is not bad. Quite a nice bready type of aftertaste to it. There is, it doesn't say it on there, but there's a honey sweetness to it. And it's reminiscent of a Bavarian Helles. Not a particularly outstanding one, but it's got a lot of the hallmarks. And that sulphurous aroma, again, it must have something to do with it, because this ain't bad. It's quite light. Not that great on the palate. Quite sweet. You sort of think that, oh, there's a ton of glucose sugar in this, which is sweetening it up. But there isn't. And the sweetness abates, and then as the finish kicks in, you're left with quite a bready, doughy type malty finish. In a blindfold test, I'd say this came from Germany. And I have to admit, and I will say, if a beer's shit, I'll tell you it's shit, this ain't too bad. Me quite like it. The only thing that's giving me a slight alarm bell is the sweetness on it. It comes across as being a little bit artificial. Now, on the ingredients, and to be honest, I don't really trust what they say on the back of the ingredients, because they don't include the yeast on it, and there is yeast in this. I don't care what anyone says. According to this is a Reinheitsgebot beer. Water, barley malt, barley and hops. But yeah, the barley could be that excessive barley could be giving it a sweetness, and there is a finish on it that I would associate with malted barley. But it ain't the worst beer in the world, I have to say. And this was about £1.30 a can. It knocks spots off Foster's, Carlin, the usual bullshit that they sell around here, Budweiser as well. If I had to compare it to something, I'd say this would be a lower grade, macro brewed German beer which isn't the worst beer in the world, but it's not the best. You can see that this, and they do produce a lot of beer, you can see that this brewery haven't put the premium ingredients into this beer. But it ain't bad. I'll tell you what, that is not the worst beer in the world. I have tasted a hell of a lot worse than that. And for the, as I say, for the price, I think that was £1.50. It ain't too bad. I will say that. It is not too bad. So what's the verdict on Utenos Sviesusis Alus lager beer? I really didn't have high hopes for this because it's a Carlsberg beer. But I have to say, it isn't the worst beer in the world I've tasted. Certainly not the best. It doesn't really come close to anything that's in the top drawer from Germany. But as lagers go, it's perfectly drinkable. There is that slight artificial sweetness, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say they've added some kind of sweetener to it, but it's not overly sweet and it's not sickly sweet. I'm sure it's glucose, it has to be, but it's drinkable. It's okay. I wouldn't say it's shit. It certainly isn't going to go down the sink. Not the best though. It tastes macro brewed. In fact, that last mouthful, I did detect a slight metallic taste to it. Very subtle, but it's there. Could be the can, I don't know, but it ain't the worst beer in the world. I'm gonna give it a 6.5 out of 10 because that's all I think it's worth. But the taste to pence ratio, it sort of balances it out to 6.5 in my opinion. Certainly not the best beer in the world, and certainly not the worst either. Just okay. And if it's a choice between this and your average Foster's, Budweiser, Carlin, Heineken, all that type of shit, well, I'm going to go for this. It probably isn't. It's probably on a par with them in their own country. This is probably the most common beer from there, but it don't taste that bad. It's certainly not the worst beer. Certainly not a pour down the sink job. Not on a par with Budweiser. On the low par with Budweiser, Foster's, and you know, all the shit, the dross that gets churned out and passed off as lager, which your average lager drinker will drink. So yeah, not bad at all. I'm going to give it 6.5, and it's not the best one I've tried from around the corner. There are better ones, you know, if you're talking about them Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania. The lager that I had the other day, the unfiltered lager, that was probably the best. But this, yeah, it ain't too bad. Not bad, not good. And remember, beer is working class champagne.